I want to welcome everyone. Believe it or not, this is our 10th speaker in our speaker series for Teens, Tools, and Hope. And that's because we had two speakers one night, Meg Lupin and her husband, which was really, really great and interesting, all about addiction. And tonight's topic is one that's really fascinating to me. And my dear friend and colleague, Penelope, hi Deb and Manu, is going to do an introduction because she is the conduit that brought us Anthony Asher. So take it away, Penelope.
Well, what I love about you, Anthony, is that you have this background with the Building Biology Institute, and I would say just a keen interest in this area. It's very natural for you, I think, to learn this type of information and assimilate it. But then it's how you really share that information, because it's very solution oriented, and I feel that it's very realistic, and you do keep a high bar, but it's also not, it's to an extent, I feel we're in this world, like you were saying, Judy, that I don't think all of our children are going to start living off grid. I don't think they're going to necessarily throw away their phones. And so how do we use this technology in a way that it's not using us? And I feel like you're a really good person to share in that way, because it's very logical, it's very solution oriented, and it's not fear mongering. So I would just love to hear your insight and how we can bring some safety and be a little bit more responsible with these devices. And how do we live in this world without really harming our health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's well said. That's definitely part of the intent that I have with bringing this information forward is to not have it be based in fear, but have it based in awareness and reality. Like, okay, this is happening, this is real, and it's serious. But really, just the goal is to raise awareness with it, to know what's actually going on, and to reduce exposure whenever possible, hopefully without sacrificing our lifestyle too much. It really depends on the person and how sensitive someone might be to electricity, but also it's helpful to everyone. If we can all be aware of this and reduce our exposure, then it's going to be really helpful to all. So that's kind of my goal.
Welcome, Leon.
Well, thank you.
We were just getting started with Anthony. And so where do you begin with something like that? Like, if you were to work with a teen, what are the areas? I want you really just to take this away, but perhaps what are the biggest concerns that we need to just be aware of, would you say? And how do we work with that?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not a parent, so I don't know what it's like to be guiding a teen in that way, but I can imagine in this day and age, it's probably pretty hard to for a teen growing up in this world to distance themselves from their cell phone. And a cell phone really is one of the highest exposures of this stuff that we come in contact with, mainly because it's a strong source of radio frequency that we put directly on our bodies and up to our heads and close to our bodies. So it is definitely one of the highest sources. And if we can find ways to limit our cell phone use and use, find a way to accomplish the needs that we have without using the cell phone, that is really ideal. Also, Wi-Fi too. Wi-Fi is really pretty easy to not have. I'm on the computer right now. I'm using Zoom. I am using Ethernet. I have a very simple, all I did was run a Ethernet cord. I drilled a couple holes in the wall and ran a cord to where I use my computer. And it's that simple. And if you can, get the computer set up so that you can, with Mac computers anyway, I know it's pretty easy. You can receive calls and texts on your computer. Obviously you can use the internet, you can use WhatsApp, all these different apps on your computer. And so if you can kind of set things up that it's easy to use your computer instead of the phone, then that's nice. You know, if you're just sitting at home on the couch, surfing the net on your phone, sending calls, sending texts on your phone, you know, that phone is right on your body and it's radiating this energy as you're using it. If instead you can have a computer and do all of the exact same things, but not being exposed to the EMFs, then that's a huge plus. Like, and I feel like that could be a really good option for teens, you know. And also, as I was thinking about this, I feel like really the number one is to lead by example and to make that a conversation and to do it yourself and to, you know, to create the better habits yourself and create the outlets for lower exposure yourself, and then, you know, have the conversations with your teen and teach them how to do it as well. And raising that awareness in the home is probably the first step.
Well, I want to thank people like you because, and I think that you personally could be very approachable to teens, but sometimes hearing it from a mother or a dad is slightly different. Like I remember one time we watched, it was a documentary that this guy had done on cell phones. And Nelson responded so much differently to that. And he said, because it's not anybody nagging me, it's just really logical science being presented, right, you know, and that really hit home. But so what are ways, I remember one time, speaking of wiring things, you had talked about being able to wire your phone so it didn't have to go off Wi-Fi. How do you do something like that?
Yeah, that also is a possibility. And I haven't kept up on this because, I mean, the technology, that's one thing about this field, the technology is always changing. But it is possible, at least it was a year ago, to plug your phone into Ethernet as well. You know, put your phone on airplane mode, turn all the antennas off, plug it in. There's an adapter that you can take an Ethernet cord, plug it into the adapter, and then plug the adapter into your phone, and you can actually use the internet on your phone without the radio frequency being emanated. That's a really cool option. I do remember my friend doing it recently, and it was kind of a process. It used to be a little bit easier, and she had to, you know, kind of do some workarounds and get a specific device. It used to be a little easier. You just got a simple adapter. She did have to get a specific device, but she figured it out and it works. The thing is with that is that you won't receive calls and texts because you're just using the internet. You're not connected to like just regular cell phone transmissions. But you know, you can use WhatsApp, you can use Signal and the Telegram, whatever, the other messaging app. Another option too is that I've heard of people doing this. I haven't actually done the process myself, but you can get call forwarding so that when you go home, you you know, you push a button basically and you make it so that when somebody calls your cell phone, it rings on your landline. So that's another cool option too. And really, like that's anything that we can do that while we're at home where we spend a lot of time, we don't have to be using the wireless technology as much, I think is really beneficial, because then when you go out into the world, it's like, okay, I need my cell phone sometimes. I'm out and about, but and obviously most of us are still going to be using that to some degree at home. But if we can reduce that, if we can have other options, then that can be really helpful.
I think it's like breaking the habit too, and that's something that I think being on the computer more does is it does bring a different level of presence to it. You can't really lug around your computer throughout the house. You know, you have to go to it and be present with it, as opposed to a text perhaps on your phone that is constantly breaking your concentration and things like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it is, I think I have experienced this and many people experience this when you go through the process of letting go of the cell phone, or, you know, minimizing it or finding that other option. It's kind of a relief, because it's this constant thing. I call it phone chores. I mean, do my phone chores, because it feels like that sometimes. I've got all these different apps. There's all these different messages with the little red bubble that tells me that there's something to do on it, and you have to go through them all, and you have to read them all, and you have to do all these chores. And when you can put a little distance to that, turn the phone off, for this time, and and then turn it on at some point when you have your time, and do your phone chores, and then move on, instead of having to be constantly connected and constantly pulled. I also notice, as I'm sure many people do too, it's hard to keep a consistent, focused stream of thought towards any activity sometimes, when I'm constantly being pulled out and distracted by a message from my phone. And then I might look at the message, do what I need to do, and then be like, oh wait, what was I doing before? I kind of can't even remember. It takes me a minute to get back into the flow. And sometimes that's an all day thing, it's constant in this world. So a lot of it is just habits, and awareness, and empowering ourselves, and taking the power back into our lives in the ways that work for us with this stuff, beyond just the negative health effects that come from exposure to radio frequency. There's also, just these quality of life elements.
Mhm. No, I agree. And I think that there are fun ways. I've seen different ways that people they have like a Sabbat, is it Sabbat for their phone, or, they don't have their phone on a particular day on the
I
weekend.
think Sebastian talked about that, didn't he, Penelope, with his kids? We
Oh,
had
I
another
didn't know.
speaker. Yeah.
But you know what? You can find creative ways, because I think anytime we're hooked on something to the point of being slightly addicted to it, it's just, we do need to have that space from it, and then we can bring it back into our lives and see the difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are ways, so that's really, I think, speaking to the consciousness and presence around phone usage. How do you work? What are ways? I have a couple different thoughts. Like, how do you think you work with just that desire to be on your phone? Like, what would you suggest to your kids if you're trying to break that addictive habit, or offer them some key information for them to digest that might impact them?
That's a good question. I probably am not a master of that, and like I said, I don't have kids, and I think it's probably going to be different for everyone. And really, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing that someone, a teen or otherwise, is excited to communicate with other people, is excited to learn things, and read about things on their phone. Obviously, there's there's unhealthy information as well, and unhealthy things that you can do on your phone. But yeah, I think it's a good question. Of
What about some bites about how, do you know anything about holding a cell phone? Maybe we could talk about ways to use a cell phone beyond being more present with it. Like, is there a distance that's healthier? Are there cases that we can use that are healthier? Like putting it on speaker, not using it in the car, like certain things that we could do to really make it a little healthier too?
Yeah, let's get into that. So really, it's distance is your friend. With all this stuff, the farther you can keep away the source of the EMF, the less exposure you're going to have. So if it's right up to your head, you're going to be getting pretty much the most intense dose that we get, because it's so close to your body and it's transmitting it. And the farther you get, the strength is magnitudes less. So I would definitely recommend using speakerphone when you can. I would definitely recommend using one of the EMF blocking cases. They
What
do
is that,
work.
Anthony? An EMF blocking case?
Yeah, so I've got one on my phone. The company that I use is called Safe Sleeve. It's basically, my phone is here, and there is a flap that goes over the phone like this, and it's like a magnet that is in this square, and the radiation won't go through that. So you can take a call and then flip it closed and put it to your head, and it does provide some amount of blockage. Also, when you put it in your pocket, you can put it, you can put the shield against
It's
your
called
body.
Safe Screen, Anthony. How do you spell it?
Safe sleeve.
Sleeve, S-L.
I'm
I'm going to
pretty
put it in the chat.
sure
Safesleeve.com,
that,
maybe?
yeah.
Anthony,
And-
I wonder if it's like the vest that they put on you before they do x-rays. You know what I'm saying? They put it on your chest or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of that protection
Right.
thing.
Similar. It's really simple. I mean, the radio frequency doesn't really go through metal. So tin foil, even, the classic tin foil hat joke. But the thing is, the caveat that I need to bring up with this stuff is, yes, I recommend it, and it's not really, it's not a full solution at all.
Mhm.
A helpful way to think about it is that radio frequency radiation is like light. If you turn on a lamp in the room, it illuminates the whole room. If you put a piece of cardboard in front of it, it's going to block the light a little bit, but the room will still be illuminated, or like light shining into a window. If you close the curtains, you're going to block some of that light from coming in, but it's still kind of lighting up the room. So it's still a high source of radio frequency that is right next to your body, and it does reduce it a little bit. It's worth using, but it's not a solution. And so and also headphones, they make headphones that they're like the air tube headphones, because the radiation will travel through a metal wire and into your ear. But get the air tube headphones, you can put the phone farther away from you while you have a phone call.
They're called air tube headphones.
Yeah, I believe that's what they're called.
I just put lessemf.com in the chat, and you can find them on lessemf.com.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I think the same company, Safe Sleeve, also makes the headphones. But yeah, and basically the kind of the main philosophy with these teachings is like, the best solution is always to eliminate the source, right?
Mhm.
To completely get rid of it is always the best. And if you can do that, then that's what you should do. But in lieu of that, you can do these other workarounds. Shielding is kind of the last resort. But so use those things, but also find ways to limit your cell phone use. And like if you're if you need your cell phone to be on, you're waiting for a call, it needs to be there, set it away from your body, try to get it 6 feet away, so that when it rings you can go over to it. But there's 5 different antennas in a cell phone usually, and there's one for regular cell calls and texts. There's one for there's 2 for Wi-Fi, and there's 2 for cellular data, like internet. And they all need to be on, and there's Bluetooth as well. I think there's only, I forget, I missed one there, but they all need to be off, or there could be some transmission happening. If your Bluetooth is on all the time, it's going to be transmitting even if all the other antennas are off. So that's something to be aware of as well. Also, when you have all these apps open on your phone all the time, they're constantly sending signals, looking for information. So if your phone's just sitting there, even if you're not making a call, a lot of times it's still transmitting. But if you are making a call actively, or a Zoom call, or anything like that, or actively surfing the internet, where it's going to be transmitting data more. So there's going to be more exposure when you're, actively using it, rather than when it's just sitting there.
I have a question, and Leon, I know that you've done EMF free, technology free camps for kids, and that's something we can talk about. And I want to talk about, is this of interest to teens? I wouldn't think that they would. I mean, of course, maybe Nelson, growing up in an off grid, is this something that they know about? Is it worth having it? And if we do tell them the negative, perhaps, implications of EMFs, would they listen? Do they care? Do we make it more interesting? And I'd like some thoughts on that.
Oh, what I will say is when Nelson saw, I forget that movie, but they were talking about gliomas, the brain tumors actually. And so they had this technology that they could see the heat penetration of the cell phone up to these models. You know what I mean? And so it would just show with increase of time, like how much more deeply that would penetrate into the mind, especially to kids. And I think that really impacted him. And then it had people, adults that had developed brain tumors after using it a lot in their employment. And so I guess my point is, I think teens in general feel very indestructible and very like nothing will touch them. And so, and usually if somebody's nagging them, they're not really connecting with them. So there's not the impact of the word, right? There's not like that little connection where they get it, because it's just like a mom nagging. So I think when they hear somebody like Anthony, if he can tell them implications, like, you know, that one chart that you showed me, and it had like the small percent that would increase danger or be potentially harmful, and then actually in reality what my devices were actually doing, and it was off the hook in comparison to this little amount that might cause potential harm. You know, that struck me, for instance.
Right.
You know?
Oh, you're muted, Judy.
Manu, I love what you said in the chat. Thank you, Anthony. You want to speak about that a little, Manu? I think it's a really great point.
Sure. So in my house, my husband is a scientist, you know, and as this technology became more and more invasive, I raised the flag, like, you know, these earbuds and the pot, whatever they're called, right? You just stick them in your ears, and I, you know, whatever I say, no, it's not true. That's not a thing. Radiation is higher in an airplane than it is when you're using your cell phone or anything. So they really do not listen to me. They do not want to see things. So even, you know, there are these videos that circulated measuring with devices, and then I get the argument, well, that's not a true measurement. That's not done properly. And so, you know, I'm kind of at a loss. So I bought the Tesla bag from Dr. Cowan's website. I myself, I have a Shield phone case. I put our what's it called, the router on a remote, so I click it off at night. But sometimes I see that somebody went in there in the night and plugged the router back in. So, you know, it's sort of like the mouse and the cat chasing each other here. Yeah, I don't know. And then I read about orgonite, and, you know, there's this guy called the orgonite donor. And he recommends, you know, staking the house, the garden around basically with these copper tubes that you bury. They have different things inside the tube, and you bury them like 3 inches down. No, you know, you bury them down, but you have like 3 inches of dirt above them still. So it's not just, you know, that you're grabbing it back out. So yeah, just, you know, those are my thoughts. I'm a bit at a loss, but you know, just to answer that question, it's not easy, you know. And then I have the houses around me. So even if I turn my Wi-Fi off, I look on my phone and like, there are 5 others around me that I could, you know, if I had their login, I would be able to connect to them. So yeah, how do I, you know, basically do all that? You know, and then like you say, there are these baseball caps that they also show they have whatever is inside the cap. So like, okay, then my brain may be protected, but what about the rest of my body? It's not, you know. Right. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of points there. Like you said, with the clothing, there's these EMF protective clothing, but the radio frequency energy will go through a brick wall or your body as if it's, as if it's nothing. So, like you said, it's a cap that's covering this much of your head, but the radiation can just go right through your body and into your brain. It can go right through the hole in your shirt, because it's not blocked, very much by your body. And also, like what you said, a lot of people miss that, like, oh, like the Wi-Fi is off in my house, but I'm detecting 5 signals from the neighbors. It's actually not that good of a measurement of how much exposure you're getting, because actually cell phones are really sophisticated devices, and they can receive and send signals from a very, very low power density. So, if I have my meter and I'm measuring a Wi-Fi signal from a neighbor, it might be like really, really low. Like you're not really that worried about it, but you can still pick it up on your phone and see that it's there. So it depends. Like I really recommend to people to get a meter. You can get a pretty useful and decent RF meter for like less than $100. There's one that I really like called the Safe and Sound Classic 2. You can get it on the Safe Living Technologies website, which is a really cool website. It's run by a building biologist, and he's got a lot of good stuff there.
Could you repeat that, please, Anthony? I'll write it down in the chat.
Yeah, the website is called Safe Living Technologies. It's probably safelivingtechnologies.com, but if you search Safe Living Technologies, it'll come up. And the meter is called the Safe and Sound Classic 2. There's also the Safe and Sound Pro 2, which I have. And it's a really nice meter. I mean, I think this one's $400, but it basically, it'll actually show you the numbers. It'll show you like what power density is getting read by the signal, whatever signal is coming in. The classic will only show you like a general range, but it's still really useful. Like it shows you, okay, yeah, there's a little bit of a weak signal here, but I'm pretty good. Or like, oh, when I'm getting closer to the router, it gets a lot higher. It also makes sound, so you can hear the sound of the router, which as you start paying attention more, you start to recognize the sounds of the different devices. You can tell the difference between a cell phone and a cell tower and a Wi-Fi router. And so, even just with this pretty simple device, you can start to get the hang of like, oh, okay, someone left the Wi-Fi on tonight, or like, or oh my gosh, what is this really high signal that's out of nowhere? Where is that coming from? I can use this meter to follow. It actually gives you an idea of what's really going on instead of just guessing. The other thing is too, like a lot of times people are really concerned about the sources outside of their houses, cell phone towers being the main one. But really, and this is ultimately a good thing, most of the time, the sources that give us the highest amount of exposure are in our house, and we have control over them. So, obviously cell phones can be a big deal if you have one close enough to your house where it's, making an effect, but 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. And we can, address what's happening in our homes and reduce the exposure quite a lot. So and I should kind of segue into, up until this point, we've only been talking about radio frequency. This is kind of the EMF that most people are aware of and have a lot of concern over these days. It is the type of EMF that is, wireless technology is getting more and more and more, cell phones, Wi-Fi. It's the big thing, and it's definitely of high concern right now. But there are 4 different EMFs that I am concerned with and measure, and they all have to be measured differently. They're all unique and have different characteristics, and they are AC magnetic fields, AC electric fields, and dirty electricity, and they all come from the wiring in our homes. And I think it's important to realize that even before, you know, wireless technology really took off in the late 90s, EMFs and electric pollution were a major concern and affecting human health for 150 years before that or longer. So this, you know, it's a frog in the boiling water. You know, it's the technology's more and more and more and more, but we have been affected by this stuff for a long time, and this is just kind of the next level. But yeah.
What are some examples of that, the other types that you're talking about?
Yeah, so magnetic fields only are present when current is flowing. So something, there has to be a load on of some kind, the fridge, a light, an electronic device, current needs to be flowing, and that always will create a magnetic field. Let me look at my notes here.
So then in that case, the distance is helpful again.
Yes, and there's several different sources for magnetic fields, you know. Some of them are outside of the house, some of them are inside of the house. With magnetic fields, there is a blessed effect that they cancel each other out. If there's a current flowing this way on an electrical line and a current flowing this way on an electrical line, there's ideally a equal and opposite magnetic field going in opposite directions that cancel each other.
Can
And
you
so
give an example of that, Anthony, please?
yeah. So if you can imagine a Romex, a normal electrical cord that runs through the walls, usually that has a hot and a neutral running through it. And in the simplest example, if you have a light switch on and it's pulling 1 amp of current, and there's 1 amp flowing along the hot line going to the light switch, and there's 1 amp flowing back along the neutral, you have basically those two wires are right next to each other, you know, in the wall, and so they are canceling each other. Those magnetic fields cancel each other out, which is great because there is no magnetic field extending into the living space. What happens is sometimes you might have 1 amp going out and 5 amps coming back. And that only happens because of a wiring error that is always against electrical code, National Electric Code. It's a violation of code, but it's actually very common because of different, you know, basically electricians don't always do the best practices. It's not necessarily dangerous, but it does have some you know, shock hazard, but it's not that much. It's rare, and it can be common practice, and so you end up with unbalanced current, and this can create actually high magnetic fields in a space. This is just one example of how magnetic fields can be created, but it's basically like I would flip on a light switch, and in that moment a magnetic field would extend into the space because of this wiring error. And magnetic fields can be really serious. They are one of, you know, magnetic fields and radio frequency are the most recognized and studied of the EMFs. You know, they're a high, magnetic fields are a high concern because they're known to cause childhood leukemia. It's been really studied a lot. They cause cancer, and they're, you know, it's one of the EMFs that if you have it in your house, you really don't want it. You know, they're more rare, but when you have them, it's like if sometimes whole families are sick because of it. So
How do you know if you have it?
you measure it.
You measure.
Yeah, that's really the best way with all of this stuff. It's like you really need to measure it. There's some things, you know, obviously if there's a Wi-Fi router, you're gonna have radio frequency going on, but ultimately it's always best to measure to see how strong it is, to see what's going on. I mean, I have a meter, it's called a Gauss meter. That's what measures magnetic fields. And
How do you spell that, Anthony? Gauss?
Gauss.
Is
Yeah.
that when you would not like have a bed? Maybe this is different. I'm not sure, but like you wouldn't have a bed on the other side of where a fridge would be, or like something like that? Or is that a different frequency?
That's a perfect example. That's another source of magnetic fields, are point sources. So like a fridge that has an electronic motor in it, when it's running, it will have a magnetic field around it, which usually isn't too much of a concern. Every house is going to have point sources for magnetic fields. The the key thing is to make sure they're not in places where you spend a lot of time.
Like sleeping, like where your head is in the bed.
Exactly. So like sleeping is the most important. Like when I go to a house and I look at stuff, like the sleeping area is the highest priority. If you have magnetic fields, like if your bed is next to, on the other side of a wall as a circuit breaker panel, another source of magnetic fields, like that's super bad. You don't want to be sleeping there. And this is a really tragic story, but a guy, that one of my teachers basically told a story of going into a house and measuring a high magnetic field on this area of the wall. And when he measured that, immediately the wife started crying and ran out of the room. And he asked the father, what's going on? And he said, this is where the crib was of our 1-year-old who.
Oh,
And he is struggling with autism and is having a lot of problems, and so like and just, it's like people don't know about this stuff, and that's just a really like heart-wrenching story, because that could happen to anyone. And so living in this electrified world, it's like this should be stuff that people know. It's like people need to be aware, even just knowing, like, okay, I shouldn't have a bed by a circuit breaker panel. Like magnetic fields create health problems. Like this is something that I should, live my life by these principles. So it's really good to, especially if you're moving into a new house, or even your existing house, to hire a building biologist that knows what they're doing, to come scan the house and see what's going on, see if there's any serious problems.
and there are
Yeah.
preventative things that you can do if they find problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's magnetic fields. That's super brief. We can go deeper into it if we have time, but also electric fields are another concern that we usually focus on mainly in the sleeping area. With electric fields, current does not need to be flowing. So if there's a wire that is hot, whether it's in the wall or whether it's a lamp cord, whether it's a computer charger, there's going to be electric fields coming off of that cord. So we living in an electrified home or an electrified office, we are constantly exposed to electric fields. They seem to create lots of serious health issues, but they are definitely a concern. I'm just kind of looking at my notes here because I wrote some things down for electric fields. Yeah. Headaches, anxiety, hyperactivity, depression, insomnia, memory problems, brain fog, chronic fatigue. Another thing that has been well studied with electric fields is that it suppresses melatonin during sleep. And melatonin is more than just this chemical, like this hormone that makes you sleepy. It's like a master healer hormone that when you sleep, it's like it's deeply healing your body as you rest. It's really important. And so it's like when we're sleeping in the presence of high electric fields, we're not sleeping as deeply. We might wake up more. We're not resting as deeply and healing as deeply when we sleep. So this is like one that I think is really important. And for some people, it makes a really big difference. Some people just overnight sleep so much better. And some people it's not as noticeable, but usually there's a run of outlets around a bedroom. So most of the time we are exposed to electric fields when we sleep, because the electric fields are going to be coming off of all of the electrical wires in the house. Even if they're in the wall, they go right through the wall. So an easy way to mitigate the electric fields is if you can figure out which circuit those outlets are on and turn that circuit breaker off at night. That's something that I do, that I tell clients to do, tell my friends to do, and it's pretty easy most of the time. Sometimes it's complicated if you're in like an apartment complex, or sometimes electricity gets complicated, but usually if you can find the circuit breakers that are in the bedrooms and you can turn them off at night, and it's awesome if at night you can really have zero EMFs, just so that you can really fully rest and heal. I think that's a big priority.
Does that answer your question, Manu? She had a
Yes,
question.
it does. Thank you so much. Yeah. But in case you cannot, let's say you cannot turn them off, how can you, is there a shielding way or a, sorry about that, my dog is chiming in, that we could block it somehow else?
There are shielding options for electric fields, and they work pretty well. You can, like, basically an electric field, it's caused by voltage, and that voltage is looking for a more grounded potential. So like our bodies are an option for it to be more grounded, or the earth. But like if you have, if you can paint the walls of your bedroom, or at least the walls behind your bed, with a conductive paint, they make conductive paint, and then you ground that paint, you put a wire, basically you can connect it to the grounding port of an outlet that basically is a copper wire that goes down into the earth, or you can do a separate ground that just goes straight to the earth, which is, there's different schools of thought on which way is better, but you're basically creating an alternate route for that electric field to go before it gets to your body. So shielding is an option for electric fields as well, but it's not as effective as turning them off, and it can get complicated because if you have electrical wires going to the overhead light in the ceiling, if you have electrical wires below you, if you're on the second floor, you have to shield sometimes every wall in the place in the room, so it can be a little bit tricky.
Okay. And I saw on the website they also have EMF paint for the walls. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the same paint that I was just talking about that can be used to shield electric fields will also shield radio frequency. So if you have, if you're living in an apartment complex and the neighbor has a Wi-Fi router right on the other side of the wall, you can paint the wall with this shielding paint, or the floors or the ceiling, and it will help.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and also, or if you have a cell phone tower next to you, you can paint walls. It's like I said, it's the last resort. It gets complicated and it's not perfect. You're not going to get 100% blockage, but it can be really, really helpful for sure. It can reduce a lot.
Does that amplify? I always sort of wondered if that paint, if say for instance you painted 4 sides of your room and you were using devices in your room, would that somehow amplify it into you?
That's talked about a lot, and it's to some degree probably yes. But at the same time, when it's not a perfect reflection, when the energy from your phone hits the wall, it's not like it just goes boing straight back. It probably dissipates, and somewhat goes through the paint into the ground, because usually the paint is grounded, but you're going to be getting a higher exposure than if there was no paint at all. So it's if
maybe you want a bedroom where you don't use a lot of tech stuff in it, that is more, you don't have your things plugged in by your bed and you have your paint.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what you brought up to me, which Manu, I think this answers one of your questions too, which your husband was talking about the airplane and radiation. It's sort of what you're saying, Anthony, is that it's these little daily hits that are cumulative and add up that can be worse than this huge one-off. Like, and they've said that with even, I've heard with like one big radioactive event. I mean, obviously if you're right there, that's different, but as opposed to something you're daily using day in and day out, on the hour. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In general, for most of us, our constant exposure to this stuff, it's not acute enough that we notice it and we're in pain from it, but it's slowly wearing us down. And I really believe that it is a central part of the problems that we're having with health as a humanity. This is something that I said to Judy when we talked earlier, is that the more that I've studied this stuff, the more that I've realized that EMFs aren't this peripheral health issue that a lot of us think of it, but rather they're a central piece. They're like really affecting us more than we realize. And a lot of people are aware of them and, have some concern around them, but there's not, like with cigarettes, everybody knows that they're not healthy. And, we try not to do them because we know they're probably going to cause a health problem. We used to use mercury in medicine, but we've had this paradigm shift where pretty much everyone gets it. Mercury's toxic. You want to avoid it. With electricity, we're still in the process of awakening to like, okay, this is really affecting our health. We should keep it at a distance. But yeah, I mean, I really like this book. It's called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg. It's I just really resonated with it. I thought it was fascinating. It's a historical account of electricity, how it first came around, how it first started affecting people's health. Arthur is electrically sensitive himself, and he's also a doctor, so he like researched this in great detail. Apparently it took him like 15 years to write this book.
What's his last name, please?
Furstenberg.
Okay.
What's that?
How do you spell it, please?
Oh, it is Firstenberg. Furstenberg.
And doesn't he talk about how you can make frequencies healing too? Like he talks about some positive things about it in there too.
There's definitely healing potential with electricity too. But usually it's used in very specific ways at very low amounts, like very low power densities. Like what we're being exposed to is way stronger than the healing ones. That's another important part, is our bodies are electrical. Like pretty much every foundational task that the body does is done by electricity. Our hearts are electric, our brains are electric. So we're exposed to, especially the alternating current that has a frequency, this constantly at very high speeds, 60 times per second, is the fundamental frequency of all electricity in our homes. I mean, 60 times per second, there's a negative field coming into the room and then retracting and then turning into negative, positive 60 times per second. It's this vibration. It's a lot different than direct than a static magnetic field that like in our bodies and like on the planet Earth. We have there's natural electromagnetic fields, but they don't alternate like the ones in modern technology. And those apparently are really what sets off the negative health effects. But that electricity is basically interfering with our body's natural processes. Magnetic fields, if you take obviously there's all kinds of circuits in our bodies where electricity can flow. We're conductive. And if you take a copper coil, a circle of copper, and you put it within a magnetic field, it's not touching anything. It's just in that magnetic field. You can measure with a current meter current on that copper wire just from being in the presence of a magnetic field. So, and they have shown that, our bodies being in the presence of magnetic fields, current is induced to flow in our bodies, which can be really, like who knows what that can do. We're still learning about it, but it's definitely creating negative health effects. I mean, another thing that one of the most captivating points that he gets into in the book is heart disease. Heart disease used to be incredibly rare. it was like, it's a totally modern disease. Like before the mid 1800s, heart disease didn't really exist. Same with diabetes. It was really, really rare. And the way that the form that it did exist in was totally different than how it exists today. And basically the mitochondria in our cells, it's like the main powerhouse of the cell. It basically operates through electrical processes, the electron transport chain. This is the last stage of digestion. When you eat food, you digest and break down the fats and sugars, and you put those in your bloodstream, and you have this fat and sugar in your bloodstream that the cells use electricity to turn into ATP, to turn into energy. And what happens is when we're constantly exposed to these technological strong EMFs, it suppresses the body's ability to use the electron transport chain and to absorb the nutrients in our bloodstream. So you have too much fat in your blood, it ends up crystallizing on the walls of the veins and arteries and creating heart disease. And you have too much sugar, then your body can't process all the sugar that's in your blood, and you end up with diabetes. So it's like, that's a really fundamental mechanism for what's creating some of the leading causes of death in humanity. And obviously our bad diets are a huge part as well. Like eating too much sugar, eating unhealthy diets is affecting it as well. But it's like, cool, the electricity is an important part of the equation that we need to start factoring in.
Along those lines, there's something very interesting. Actually, it's Dr. Cowan again, Manu, that has something Cosmic Heart. I forget the name of the book, but Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. But he talks about how, and I thought this was fascinating. I'm sort of learning this, so I won't say it perfectly maybe, but the outward edge of the arteries and veins, I believe, is hydrophilic. It's water loving. And then the next innermost layer is a gel-like substance. And there's sort of this, there's this repulsion and attraction. There's a negative and positive charge between the two of those. And that he is saying that, and there's a lot of data to back this up, that is what creates the pumping or the movement, actually, as opposed to the heart pumping, because the speed at which the blood flows into the heart is the same as when it comes out. And then it increases, I think, coming up from the capillaries versus like being pumped, like it's different than how we've been taught. And he said that if you put a hydrophilic tube into a lead box, that actually there is not the same movement, but when the sunlight comes through our bodies and ignites that, almost, it's like our intricate connection with nature and sunlight. And I could see how it's also tied into our frequencies and these exposures, you know what I mean, to making that more productive and being able to flow.
Totally.
Wow.
I've heard about
Wow.
That's
I know, it's pretty
amazing.
like mind-blowing, really.
You did a very good job of explaining that.
But just think about that light coming through. It's like how it's described, as if you have a flashlight and it shines through your hand, and the light penetrates your hand and then glows red, that the sunlight is pouring through our being and just alivening us.
I have a question, Anthony, about, were you through with that train of thinking, Penelope? Okay.
Yep.
This is a concept of, when you think about free energy and Tesla and perhaps new energies that are new technologies that might have be coming out in the future. When you think about free energy, does that have any effect on the EMFs? Is it the same thing, or I just had a question about it?
Honestly, I don't know that much about it. I don't know that much about free energy. I've heard about it and heard people talk about it, but I don't know enough about it to say. I do know. Go ahead.
No. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
that, you know, with Teslas, with electric cars, things like that, there are, you know, definitely EMF concerns, but I'm not sure about free energy.
Yeah, I think we'll start to see. Penelope, do you know anything about that?
I don't actually know anything at all about that. But that, I mean, that does bring what you're saying, Anthony, brings up the point about the batteries, because I think there is this association with these things being so eco-friendly. And I've heard that those batteries are quite concerning in some ways. I mean,
I've heard that as well.
could you speak on that topic, Anthony?
Yeah, I also am not a master on this topic as well, but but I have measured a couple electric cars, and there's definitely high magnetic fields and electric fields to worry about. Also, just in regular cars, there's magnetic and electric fields to be concerned
Oh,
about.
that's
And
interesting.
then, yeah, it is, because the electrical system of the car, you know, is present. But yeah, and then more and more in modern cars, they always have Bluetooth. They always, you know, the Teslas and stuff, they have cellular data right in the vehicle, so they are transmitting radio frequency as well. And when you're in a car, you're in a sealed metal box, pretty much, that's reflecting. You know, you're in a little microwave, and the windows are usually the low E glass that is a natural block for radio frequency as well. So making a cell phone call, or, you know, having Bluetooth and cellular data transmissions in your car is, you know, it's a pretty high exposure. It's not ideal at all.
And all the screens and everything now that are on the dashboard, you know, the
Yeah.
dashboard, the GPS and everything like that.
Totally.
Judy or Anthony, I want to thank you guys for this presentation.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. It's not like it's the first time I'm hearing this, but I'm really hearing it.
Yeah.
And I want to say that you're on the right side of history, if that's a phrase I can use right now. And people will come around. People will come around. I remember talking to our children. I'm more concerned about children as a youth minister. And I remember talking to them about the environment and how we can begin to support and take care of our environment. And they were looking at alternatives. They kept saying, well, Reverend Leon, what can we do? What can we do? And at the time, this was years ago, more than 10 years. And I would say, I would like you to eat, is it possible you can eat a vegan sandwich? Back then, they were like, oh God, it's so gross. Oh my God, right? But now it's more success. It's more acceptable. I mean, maybe because all the outlets have these Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers and all that stuff. But I begin to show them how eating less meat can help our environment, and it wasn't accepted then, but now it's cool. And so I wanna say to you, is it possible that we can come from the angle of what are some alternatives, as opposed to giving them the harsh reality of cancer and things like that? Could we start with something just as simple as, when you look at your energy level, these waves, this electric, it affects your energy level. And I can personally attest to that, because I used to sleep with my cell phone, because it right in the bed next to me. And I said, this couldn't be good. And I had to stop that. And you just confirmed that for me. But I want to say, is it possible that we could begin to look at alternatives, especially when it comes to children? And because like the parent said earlier, my children, they're not going to listen, because the cell phone is considered their friend. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do an e-camp, and that is a camp with no electronics. I took kids, especially the preteens. I took our preteens, and we practiced heart-to-heart, eye-to-eye communication. And the kids loved it. We got there on Sunday, and by Wednesday, they said, Reverend Leon, can we stay another week? They had not experienced this type of communication. They had not experienced that we are some of the greatest, how should I say it? We are some of the greatest cell phones on the planet because we're so communicative, we're so versatile, we're highly adaptable, and there's power there. I stress the power that's within us. And so I want to say to you, Anthony, and I want to say to you, people will come around, but in the meantime, is there and I'm not saying you're not friendly. You're very, I think you're cool. I think you're very cool.
No, that's saying something, Anthony.
No. Is there a way we could begin to talk about this from a alternative way that will ease them into it? Just like I said, the vegan burger is not the greatest thing to eat, but it's a step towards creating a more friendly environmental planet. What's an alternative that we can talk about? And as a matter of fact, I would love when the next time I do a camp, I want you to be there. But I want to talk about alternatives to using all these cell phones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because they saw live and in person. They said, Reverend Leon, I was upset. One young guy said, I was upset because my sister sent me a Facebook message for my birthday, and that just didn't feel right. Said, oh my God, we're on to something here. He said, she sent me a Facebook message, and I didn't like that at all. We crave human touch. We crave human longings. And I'm not saying let's get rid of technology. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that let's begin to look at alternatives and look at, because we're not victims. We're not victims. Just like we created all these waves and all these things you're talking about, we can begin to utilize them for our good, for our usage. Okay. I want to stop there because I can go on, but what do you feel about alternatives? And is there such a thing that we can do?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, really, I feel like you are emanating the solution there and gave such good example. Like that's what we have to, that's the alternative. The alternative's right in front of us. It's us, it's in us. It's really what we want. We're just distracted. It's like, obviously we want the direct human connection. And it's like we get maybe a little false sense of that from the Facebook message, but you don't get the full thing. And like you just said, like, even just a few days at the camp with the kids experience this direct connection, like they loved it. And who wouldn't? It's part of being human, And that's something that I've thought about actually a lot as I've been on this journey of like, that's something that I've wanted to bring forward with this message of, it's not like, let's stop using the cell phone because it's bad. It's like, it's not all about that. It's also about, it's not because it's bad, but it's because it's distracting us from what we really want to be experiencing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's beautifully said. We are at an hour of this wonderful information from Anthony. We can continue on. I think that we've kind of come to a place now that's just so lovely it brings it back to humanity. It brings it back to realness. And thank you for bringing us fully around Leon and Anthony, and of course, Penelope and Deb and Manu. Are there any last thoughts, Anthony, as we close out, or questions?
I think that's really it. I think that was a way to have closure. I guess the last thing that I would say is just, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
And how can people be in touch with you, Anthony?
Email. I can give you my email.
Sure. You want to put it in the chat?
Sure.
And as you do that, I'm going to share the screen We're very excited that, of course, Anthony was so wonderful this evening. We have July 25th in 2 weeks. Dr. Marcia Tongel will be talking about gift education. Of course, you know Marcia Leon. You've been working with her for quite some time. And I think you'll be surprised as to what gift education actually is. I think both Anthony and Leon touched on it about the gift that we give to one another as we emanate emotions and connection, human to human. And that's what gift education is all about. So that's on July 25th. And after that, on August 3rd, we were having a one-of-a-kind teen panel. I know you won't want to miss that. And that's our teens are coming together, led by Lainey Liberty, who is a transformational coach for kids and a world schooler. And they'll be talking about their views on philosophies and what's going on in the world for them. So that's going to be really, really great. I wanted to just let everybody know about that. We have another message, one new message. Let's just see if somebody wants to say, oh, Anthony, great. We've got Anthony. So it's ASHERANA9@gmail.com. I'll put that in the recording when it's up on YouTube. And there's Todd. Hello, Todd. Sorry you missed the call, but we it will be up on YouTube probably within a week. I'll let everybody know. Any last words, Anthony, before we say yes, Penelope?
I just want to answer. I think Leon too, we had this teen group, and what we really saw was that it happened when everything was more closed down and the children were really craving connection. And it was really hard for them to come together because they didn't know one another. And we sort of nudged them. And I think there's a way where right now parents are sort of being told to, children are getting debit cards. Children are more and more getting responsibilities allowed to them at younger and younger ages. And the parents don't feel, I think, comfortable stepping in and nudging their kids in a direction. And I think what I see is when kids, like with you, had that experience of no devices, they could experience connection, right? Then it came from their heart. But I think they do need to be nudged a little bit to experience it.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah. And so thank you for doing that.
And then also, just finally, Anthony, is there a way that we could begin to, and I know there's a lot of material out now, is there a way that we could begin to show them as opposed to talking to them? One of the parents brought up the fact that, and Penelope brought this up in terms of they can't hear us. Many times they can't hear us. And so there's a way we can show them, because many times the eyes never tell the full story. But what I'm saying is I had to get to a point where my energy was so low, Anthony, and the doctors were saying, well, it was vitamin D. But now that I hear you, I'm pretty sure these electromagnetic waves were part of it also.
Absolutely.
Why my energy was so low? I'm like, no. There's more, because I would sleep with my cell phone because I didn't want to miss a call. And I was like, no, stop doing this. Take that phone out of here. It was just intuitively came up with that,
Yeah, right. A lot of people come to that and just on their own, people get it. People somehow know. And some people feel it. Some people are really sensitive to it. It makes them sick. They're like, no, I mean, I feel like this is more your specialty, but just like, how can we find those outlets where our kids can see it for themselves?
Yeah.
Like, can somehow see without just being told directly, but can see it for themselves of like, oh, that cell phone is actually getting in my way of having this awesome connection at this camp and being outside and being in nature and just playing. Oh, but then, the phone rings and all of a sudden I don't feel good anymore and I'm stressed.
Back in the matrix. Back into the matrix.
Right, but yeah, I like that. I really like that idea of just like even just a few days just without it. That can give a lot of perspective, because we don't get that very often, or at least a week would be better. A week camp, just playing in nature, playing games, just all about human connection. just so that we can experience that, just so that the kids can experience that, so that then when they go back, they can see the contrast, you know?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think a
Beautiful.
challenge would be fun, somehow to have a challenge and make it almost a game of, can we do it for without a week,
Ooh,
something
love
like that.
prizes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that.
Yes. Beautiful.
Well, I'm going to say arrivederci. Thank you all. Anthony, blessings, and thank you so much for the wonderful information. It was certainly a group think tonight and a group share. So I thank you all, and check into my YouTube channel, Judy Julin, in about a week. I'll send emails out, and your recording will be there, Anthony.
Anthony,
Great.
thank you so much. That was so powerful. Really, really, really enjoyed it. Really.
Thank you so much.